A long overdue video that was supposed to come out in May. But welcome to the Harbinger series, where I talk about the unreleased Harbingers and theorize on their current state so far. And today, let's talk about Arlecchino, the Knave. Disclaimer. This is all just a bunch of theories and are not indicative of the final product. I'm also going to be focusing on the narrative aspect of Arlecchino instead of any kind of external researching, because there's actually a lot more to unpack here about her that I'm really curious about. We know almost nothing about Arlecchino, so it should only be normal that most of these theories are just grasping at straws. But this is all just a fun thought experiment, and again, nothing indicative of the final product. But let's begin. Arlecchino is the mysterious unnumbered Harbinger who, in the current lore, has been theorized to either be 4th or 10th based on the voices, lines, and structures we know from the game so far. Arlecchino's true name is unknown, but her title Knave is a fascinating call into her deeper ruthless nature. A knave can be referred to as multiple things according to the Wikipedia page. A rogue, deceitful fellow, a person who always lies, another name for the jack in the playing card games, a British softcore pornography magazine published in 1968 to 2015. Right, anyway, we can see the title blend into her demeanor despite the short introduction she had in the Lazzo. Not the last one, but you know. She is suspected as having red X's as her primary motif, with her eyes, sigil, and even earrings depicting the X's. She also has a lot of diamonds across her patterns. She has white hair and a black streak down her bangs, but if you actually look carefully, there's a very high chance that Arlecchino has a braid. If you zoom in on her portrait, you can see a bit of white sticking from the lower part of her neck. It's assumed that her top has a tight turtleneck-like structure, so it's improbable that this is a piece of fabric, hence the braid theory. And in the event that this is confirmed, I would like to have a moment of silence for the people that thought that Arlecchino had short hair. Another fun fact about Arlecchino is that she's one of the many characters in Genshin that were given the wrong pronouns and title before the visual art of her released. When her name was first dropped, the NPCs called her Lord Arlecchino, which was in turn changed to Lady in future patches of the World Quest. According to the comments from those that spoke Chinese and read the original text, this was because of the lack of gendered pronouns in the original text, so the ambiguity was well warranted. But the title has been updated since then, which confirms that Lady and Lord in the Fatui context are gendered, unlike the usual gender-neutral Lord that we usually see the Archons be referred to as. For example, Nahida and Rukkhadevta as the Greater Lord and Lesser Lord. Arlecchino in the Lazzo makes a reference to the crying of children, which fits well with her running the House of the Hearth. The House of Hearth is an orphanage in Sejnaya who took in orphans from the 7 nations to raise and grow them as their own. People who belonged to certain ethnicities or had distinct features relating to a foreign land, such as Leodochka Snezhevna, who was in Izumen, will be taught matters concerning this land when she was young. According to one of its members, Trofim Snezhevich, or Alfonso, after coming of age, those with potential undergo training to become agents. They infiltrate different locations to await orders. Those without last names are given either Snezhevich if you're male or Snezhevna if you're female. The orphans view their bonds with each other as tighter than blood, and a lot of them remain loyal to Arlecchino and the Fatui for giving them a new life. The sadder reality, though, is that not all of them realize just how deep the harsh cruelties of the House of Hearth could actually have. Arlecchino as Knave bleeds well into her seemingly dualistic nature. While appearing cold and collected on the surface, Tartaglia and Wanderer both share distaste for her seeming lack of loyalty and a single sane bone in her body. Tartaglia says that she has her own agenda, and dislikes her because if she could benefit from betraying others, she would. Wanderer also says that Arlecchino is a wolf in sheep's clothing, who exerts a graceful and cordial front, but she actually has a crazy side that silences those that have seen that part of her. Now we move on to the Commedia dell'arte part of her and to the inspirations that could have come from the source material. Unlike my other interpretations when it comes to the characters of their Commedia counterparts, Arlecchino's interpretation would be a bit different because I'm seeing if I can mix another source material from this, and that's her title. The Knave is actually also prevalent in card games, as the Jack playing card is also referred to as the Knave. The title can also refer to the context of a male servant without a specific skill, and is considered as even a foot soldier within royal households. It's also had a history of being a derogatory term, considering that it does also allude to vagrancy. The Knave was then called the Jack when the decks were finally published, which is derived from a generic name that could be applied to a lot of lower-ranking citizens at the time. Now, blending this royal servant and the trickster archetypes well is the Commedia counterpart of the character, the Harlequin. The The Arlecchino, or the Harley Quinn, is the best-known comic servant. This is the classical clown-like jovial servant type that's mischievous in his own way. His trickster qualities are based on the mischievous devil character. He was an acrobat, agile, and a folly to a lot of the plot if he so desired. Arlecchino is also the love interest of Columbina, or at least, he has interest in her. As such, with all of those descriptors in mind, let's begin theorizing. What I love about Arlecchino's characterization is that you can concretely see the duality that Wanderer is talking about. On one hand, you have a character that appears collected and calm, but on the other, you can't exactly have the sanest person when one of your biggest projects is the literal indoctrination of children. First, we begin with her number. The number 10 theory stems from the fact that in the World Quest, the very special fortune slip where Arlecchino was first name-dropped, it was mentioned by the NPCs that La Señora's death would be the perfect opportunity for them to build up Arlecchino's prestige, as a show of kindness and gratitude. The number 4 theory, though, stems from the fact that the voice lines of the Wanderer and Child are both arranged in such a way that the Harbingers with confirmed numbers are properly next to each other, and Arlecchino's name being between Damslet and the Rooster. So in my opinion, the number 4 theory is the stronger of the two unless this is a horrible red herring. We also do need to consider the implication that if Arlecchino is the 4th by this logic, this means that Capitano's rank is higher than Dottor and Columbina's. The implications is kind of funnier though if you don't think of the Irminsul. This means that Tartaglia is just that much of a sore thumb that they weren't willing to make him the 10th. Now, let's dissect the Lazzo. She is presented as a voice of critical scrutiny, cool and collected to criticize Pantalone and Pulcinella's statement despite being business people. However, you can hear the slight toxin in her voice as she makes a low comment about the children, but I want to dissect what she actually says in this scene. She says that Rosalind died in a foreign land, and that she criticizes Pantalone and Pulcinella for staying in their homeland. While she is referring to them, that means she's likely not from Mondstadt. It's not yet completely safe to say that her saying your homeland means that Snezhnaya is not hers, because in the context of what she says, it's more like her doing a jab towards Pantalone and Pulcinella instead of her talking about herself in the context of the your. And I also find it kind of fascinating that she calls them heartless businessmen and dignitaries, considering that she's of a Tui Harbinger, a direct contributor to the strongest political and military unit in possibly the whole of Tivat. But if what Tartaglia and Wanderer said are true, then this is just her being sarcastically critical, and she's perfectly aware that she's also in the same position as them. Or it could be tied to her backstory, in which she could possibly share Tartaglia's distaste of the overly political agenda of some Harbingers. This also ties in with the fact that she herself allegedly has her own agenda, and that her true allegiance isn't completely to the Tsaritsa. Now we move on to the red X's and her power set. Now the reason I made this video is because I actually wanted to talk about her red X's. The significance of red could be a motif to the knave, especially with the diamonds in her clothes. She could be the knave of diamonds. However, considering the amount of nobility in court motifs, I'm inclined to believe that this is a sigil of a noble house. Or maybe even theorize that this was an experiment or experience she had when she was younger, considering that she also has the X's in her eyes. Though the amount of theorizing that that's going to require is much more difficult and honestly just me grasping at straws. But honestly, what I'm more interested in thinking about is her power set with the red X as a motif. This could go any way, and honestly, even if Hoyo doesn't follow this path for her, that'll be perfectly fine. I love to think that Arlecchino is a kind of dualist character. One, because it's amazing with her aesthetic, and that I love the idea of her being a sword user. She's graceful in one hand and then absolutely barbaric on the other. And if you want to incorporate the red X's into her motif and her attacks, I actually have a bit of an idea. If you ever watch Bleach, incorporating X-shaped slashes into attacks would be pretty cool. Kind of like this shot of 2 energy slashes or an X marker on her target. If Hoyo does go for the fencer route, or at least in her more human form, it would be cool to see her move like Weiss Schnee from Ruby. But the problem with this headcanon is that Hoyoverse is going to need to really be creative visually for her boss fight in the event that we do fight her, considering that Tartaglia has the same vibe of melee-based stage fighting in the beginning of his fight with an X-shape attack somewhere in the combo. I'd absolutely love for her to be a melee fighter, but if Hoyo does go for an alternative route completely and integrate more fantastical elements into her design, then I wouldn't be opposed to that. I just hope that they keep it consistent with the red X as her motif, because you can do a lot of things with that kind of aesthetic pattern. Now for the potential backstory. While we know almost nothing about Arlecchino's backstory so far, we do know that she has a strange fascination or understanding of children, expressing cruel sympathy for their tears when she was talking with Pantalon and Pulcinella. But if I wanted to go deeper, I want to know more about her quote-unquote hidden agenda and the title that she possesses. If Genshin goes through with the cards route, this could mean that Arlecchino used to come from a life of aristocratic servitude, in which he was the ranking member of the court. The Fatui tend to have motifs of isolated individuals from society, whether it's by unfortunate circumstances or completely warranted exile, so a lower-ranking member of a noble house that's been fed up with her circumstance would be thematically appropriate. There is also the continuous theme amongst them of being messed up by someone of higher power or authority, the Sumer Academia, the Lectuarchon, or previous dynasty. So this would be a pretty nice continuation of that pattern if Arlecchino is from an aristocratic lineage, though I wouldn't be opposed to her being something like Pantalone, who started in destitution as well. This could also have the weird implication that Arlecchino is much older than she looks. Consider this, the House of Hearth hasn't been confirmed to be Arlecchino's project originally, but it is assumed that she has been running it enough to the point that a lot of the orphans who have grown up considered it to be an act of gratitude to work for her. And we know that there are adults already who have left the orphanage, which only makes you question mathematically how old is Arlecchino. Considering the inhumanity of most of the Fatui Harbingers, though, I wouldn't be surprised if she was just another irregular human creature with a long lifespan. I just want to know why she decided to start, or at least run an orphanage in the first place. I also want to note that she has a hidden agenda, and whatever it is, we'll just have to wait and see. I also do want to bring into attention the fact that she has a connection with Columbina, who has been theorized before to be a Seelie. But now we move on to the significance of the House of Hearth. When I was thinking about the orphanage that she ran, I can't help but think of two things. One, Genshin backed it again with crimes against children, and two is that from an omnipotent perspective, this is actually a very ingenious plan of indoctrination, all in terms of sourcing, utility, then disposal. Yes, I'm actually talking about human lives, but please bear with me. This is the Fatui we're talking about. Arlecchino is potentially handling a really important sector of soldier recycling, because enlisting of regular citizens from Snezhnaya to work for the military may only go so far, and mandatory labor for the state neither always makes the best quality of soldiers, nor always makes the most loyal ones. Education and indoctrination are conceptually similar, but the implications of the latter are much more horrifying when you're discussing children. But this is a fictional game, who cares, right? Certainly not Arlecchino. Let's start with the source. In the world of Genshin, orphans are very easy to produce. In the world quest, A Very Special Fortune Slip, we see that the people of Watatsumi were about to be sabotaged by the Fatui, and one of the Fatui spies states that this would be a perfect opportunity for them to gain more orphans that can be taken care of by the house. What's fascinating about this process is that the beauty of indoctrinating children lies not only in the scope of the source, considering that this is an international orphanage, but also because of the susceptibility of children psychologically for indoctrination. We know that the children are taken in to be taught of the affairs of the international, but only for the purpose of them to infiltrate them as spies in the event that they grow old enough to join the Fatui. And they're also taught that the family that they found in the house is tighter than blood. And while the found family trope can be a wholesome concept, we need to consider that loyalty is deepest when they're the only people you've ever known. It's really hard to break out of that kind of emotional vulnerability, and that's something we observe from the letter that Alfonso gave for his brothers and sisters. But the important thing to note here is that the orphanage is not the complete one-to-one conversion of child to soldier into adulthood. It's mentioned that the Fatui only keep a close eye on the people with strong potential. Now, what that means for the people that are left behind can either be they get to live their lives peacefully into adulthood like regular citizens, or they're enlisted anyway into the Fatui as foot soldiers, or they get employed at the Taurus Human Resource Department. Probably, hopefully not. Genshin doesn't have the best record of letting people who were picked by the Fatuis just stay alive if they're not worth it anymore, you know? Arlecchino expressing sarcastic care for the children crying also makes me worried for their safety. What I love about this plan is it targets something psychologically rooted. And while I really wanted to give the benefit of the doubt to Arlecchino for just wanting to provide the orphans a home, after seeing the world quests and the lengths some of the children have tried to leave behind their life in the orphanage, is really upsetting. As far as we know, the actual facilities of the House of the Hearth aren't like Colley's experimentation chambers, and there's a true building of trust between the orphans and the caretakers, so much so that the teachers almost become parental figures for the kids. So at the very least, the kids are being taken care of. But it's still evident that as the children grow up and they begin to realize the faults in their system, there's this chasm that grows between their anonymous critical thinking versus what the teachers taught them. So the question is, are they taken care of afterwards, or are they taken care of afterwards? With someone as suspicious as Arlecchino, your guess is as good as mine. Besides, it's not really that difficult to get rid of orphans, especially with the military power of the Fatui. When all of your contacts and units are kept under surveillance in one place, it's really difficult for you to run and hide. And it's especially difficult for people to start asking questions about you if they're also trusted by their family and friends. For all the world knows, you died in a ditch, and the brothers and sisters you have back home would be none the wiser. But that's it for me today, and thank you for watching. This has been a fascinating video to make since I really wanted to talk about the narrative place that Arlecchino has as a character, and I've been really trying to scour the internet of what kind of a significance the X could have, and the only thing that I could really find was the red X from Teen Titans. And while I know Genshin loves the references, this isn't exactly the most convincing of things. But before I end this video, I want to make a massive announcement. I collaborated with the Shade Chamber on their recent episode about gacha and gambling and casino tactics, and I am absolutely honored that I got to talk about a paper essay topic with such amazing people. I'm a noob in the industry that can only really go off on research papers, so to actually hear the opinions of people so learned was such an honor. So check out the episode in the link below and subscribe to the Shade Chamber while you're at it. They're so great. I love their work. Anyway, that's it for me. Bye-bye.